the main line now. So maybe the most important part of, well, I suppose of the lines you're going to play against the French defence. A lot of fun. I do suggest you look at that model game of Magnus Carlsen's at the start of the course, so you have an idea about what ideas we're playing in this theory section. But a very new and modern approach to the French, which is cool. And I wouldn't know what to do as black against this idea. Being a French defence expert and a grandmaster, that surely puts you in good stead for playing this line with the white pieces. So we dive straight in and with the advance, and now after the standard moves, knight c6, we're finally coming to queen b6, the main daddy-o, the big daddy of the move. And most French players will play this because it's recommended nearly everywhere for black. You know, if you're learning the French defense, and this move will be the main recommendation in nearly every text. We now put our bishop on the most active square, fitting in with the philosophy, and now pawn takes d4 is the main move. Now bishop d7 will just transpose to the main lines with castling. Just remember, when they take on d4, do not be in a rush to take it back, because we're not really taking it back, right? Just remember that one. I would like to say though, it's always interesting to look at the clashes between top computer engines, because let's be honest, they're stronger than top humans, and see what they play in certain openings. And well, I've been doing that a lot more recently, just to get new ideas and maybe old openings. And after bishop d7, the top computers, they always take on c5. And actually, this is not just a computer idea. I can remember this given in some French defense books as why black should take on d4 first, because after castles, black gets a little bit of a tricky position sometimes with b4 being played. And we can even play this line with the knight coming to d4 without sacrificing a pawn. But we're keeping things with the sacrifice throughout our course. So, just to tell you that is another option. But importantly, after c takes d4, we now come to our main line, and it's not this taking on d4, which is the traditional Milner-Barry. It's this move which I didn't even know existed, castling, until Carlsen played this and made it famous. Now black should go bishop d7 here. It's a mistake to take on c3, because after knight takes c3, white simply has easy development and compensation immediately. As we've seen, bishop e3 is often a move here, and that, even without the a6 square being played, because taking on b2 will spell disaster with a knight coming to b5. So this is very good compensation for white already. So black should play bishop d7, and well, we looked in that introductory game at knight bd2. So this is one option, but I'm for the theory section, I'm actually going to suggest another move, but don't panic, because I know in the move trainer, the one slight, I'm not going to criticize Chessable, but the one slight thing to bear in mind is that the move trainer only sort of prepares you in one line really as white, and the thing to bear in mind is that often there's a couple of different moves that lead to the same kind of idea. So whether you played rook e1 or knight bd2 here, it's the same idea, right? Just in a slightly different move order. And I actually feel that rook e1, as we talked about in that Magnus Carlsen game, is slightly more accurate. It's nice to have this rook here immediately. It gives us a bit more freedom, and the freedom it gives us is we can, in some situations, again, these are just showing you why it might be more useful than putting the knight here. We can, in some situations, move this knight because e5 is not a pre, and also f6, f5 become a lot harder because of the e file. So this is our main recommendation. It's the pet line now of Johnny Hector. So Johnny Hector, I did mention Magnus Carlsen because you always look at the top players, world champion plays it, you open your eyes. But Johnny Hector's pet line this, and this is it's a very interesting way to play, and it's a really rare idea. This one, just showing that I don't know it means it's rare. And whoops, let's not dive in that quickly. And so what are we trying to do? Well, what we're trying to do is this idea we've talked about, that bringing the knight there, and this is one of the main ideas. But we don't need to be in a rush to play that with rook e1. The other idea of playing rook e1 is now we're sort of waiting for black to take here, because if black takes here, we take on c3 with a knight, and our knight is very well positioned to hassle our bishop. This is a really nice developing position, and it's even preferable than the Magnus Carlsen plan of coming around this way. So it's kind of we're kind of waiting for that to happen. And while we're waiting for that to happen, we're going to play as many other useful moves as we can. So h4, h5 is a very useful plan to stop the knight coming to g6 and gain some ideas over or on that area of the board. And you know, only when we played all these other useful moves like h4, h5 do we then play knight d2. We don't really want to allow queen takes b2 by moving our bishop on c1, so we can't move the bishop. So we play everything else we can, and then when we got our pawn there, there's not really anything else we do. Then we play knight d2. So let's just play as many useful moves as we can before going for the Carlsen. I say the Magnus Carlsen idea, it's really the Johnny Hector idea, but as you saw it in the Magnus Carlsen game, let's stick with the Magnus Carlsen idea. And I apologise, you know, for the people who played it before him. So after rook e1, and let's just also, before we go there, the main line, which 99% of games continue here, maybe not after this video, is pawn takes d4. And this is the Milner-Barry proper, when after knight takes here, knight d2 is a David Smerdon idea here, but the main line is this position. And I've always thought black is absolutely fine in these positions, and I don't think white has enough compensation, because the queen is so much more active than some of those other lines we looked at, and the queen can often come over to h4, which I used to always play, and black can start the attack over there. So we're avoiding that, and we're going rook e1. Now, a number of moves here, and I think knight e7 is going to be our main choice. Well, I don't think, I know. And this move, knight e7, is the most common move as well. Now, let's just have a look at what happens again if black takes on c3. And this is kind of why we waited with this rook e1 move. We want this to occur. So after knight takes c3, bishop e3, knight a4, knight b5, that knight has a lot of possibilities. And if you watched the last video, you know that as soon as a6 is played, you should be looking for bishop e3, if it can be played. And it can tactically be played here, because if the queen retreats, we have this strong idea of bringing something to the b6 square. If the queen takes on this one, normally we want to play knight b5 against this, but we can't now. So instead, we can go knight a4, queen a3, knight into b6, rook d8, and now just rook b1. Yes, we're 2 pawns down, I realise, but it's a very, very risky position for black to play, and the computer confirms we have more than enough compensation here with lots of differing ideas. What about d4 in this position? Well, if d4, our point is now we can take this one. This happened in Kostenjevic versus Sagarvati in 1981, and after bishop takes, black can't really secure the knight on that square. If he had like a knight coming to f5 or to c6, so a knight already on e7, it might be possible, but he hasn't. So actually the best way to regain the piece is just bishop c2. And again, we're going to take there, we're not even a pawn down. If bishop c5, knight e4, and we are breaking through, winning our pawn back with great play. So pawn takes, knight takes, and a6 seems like a waste of time actually here, because bishop e3 is very nice, and a6 also weakens this square. So what about something else? Let's say knight b4. Well, we go bishop e3. This is our normal move, and our basic plan against knight b4, I feel, is don't allow that bishop to be exchanged, because long-term wise, it's a great piece. And a lot of these ideas are long-term positional ideas. So our main idea is to play bishop b1, a3, and b4. And if something like bishop c5 here, well, we can now take that one. We don't mind swapping dark square bishops. Generally, the dark square bishop is a good piece of black's in the French defense, much better than his light square bishop, which is trapped behind here. That dark square bishop can be good, and it also sort of weakens some squares when we capture it. And now we go for this bishop b1 move, a3, and here, well, our knight's dropping if we go b4, so let's just defend it. And we're going to now push over here. We're not panicking because we're a pawn down. We're going to gain play on both areas of the board. Please remember, this idea is to gain flank play because we have this pawn in the center. Nc6 would be very proud of this idea. Nc6 championed our approach here in his book, My System, which has varied reviews. But Nc6 talks about having a pawn in the middle of the board, overprotected pawn. And that allows us to play on both areas of the board in this situation. So we're playing over on the queen side, but also when black castles, this bishop's going to be a key attacker, and we can use our h-pawn. We can even swing our queen over as well. So we're just keeping our options open. So after pawn takes c3, I think you can see knight takes, and we have great play. Bishop e3, knight coming in, h4, a3, and b4 flank attacks. Now, bishop c5 is misguided. I mean, if the bishop could stay on that square, great. But it just runs into b4. And we don't even need to sacrifice a pawn here. The bishop has to retreat, b5, the knight moves. And I like taking on d4 with a knight, actually. This is, again, the important difference between what we're doing and what the main lines in the advanced French are doing. The main idea we're doing is trying to get a knight to this square, often the knight on b1, but this knight otherwise. And here queen g4 becomes an option. So that, just remember, d4 is for the knight generally, not always, but for the knight in a lot of cases. Back to this position, bishop c5 not working. Now knight h6 is, well, it is rarer than knight e7. I expect that's because white can always take on h6, but as we discussed before, we're not in a rush to do that. We shouldn't be doing that. And there's a weird little move here, actually. I mean, both Johnny Hector and Gawain Jones, another brilliant attacking player, have played a3 here. And there's an argument for that because you're leaving the knight here and we're just trying to go b4. This is very exciting. But there's a new idea, newish idea here with h3. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth is this? And this is like a prophylactic move to, in some cases, go g4. And really, you're saying, well, your knight on h6, black. What are you doing with your knight on h6? We're ruling out it coming to g4. And if it ever comes here, we can now play g4 with a little bit more support. So we're basically just playing a waiting move. And this is very subtle. And this shows why you need to get into your opponent's mind with these variations. And you're just saying, I want to kill that knight. So it's a weird little move. Let's just see how the game continues. Bishop e7. And now that we're not going h4, I should note here, because it doesn't have as much point in these positions. You actually give away the g4 square. And now that maybe we don't have any more useful moves to play, we've got the rook here. I don't like taking on h6, giving away the dark squares. It might appeal to you because you're ruining black's king side, but it's actually very dangerous to give away your dark square bishop and allow black to keep his. So we haven't got any more useful moves. We now go for the Magneto plan. And the Magneto plan is just to develop here and try to use that one coming in here. Now, in this case, taking on c3 is better time for black because we can't take with the knight. So we have to take with a pawn. And after something like knight f5, we always go rook b1. This is part of our plan, as you should know from the model game at the start. And when the queen goes back, we continue in Carlsen-esque manner with knight b3. And we're looking for those dark squares. Other strong players have played this. Mamedov versus Blueburn. Mamedov, 2020. Very modern idea. We're looking for the dark squares. And after h6, the game continued bishop f4. Now that piece should be developed. And now queen d8 can be met by g4. This is one of the reasons we put a pawn here. But an even stronger idea is now taking the chance to take this one and just going knight b d4. we're not even grabbing that pawn. We're just playing in the center with ideas of e6. And we can now move the knight to b5. Look at this knight's route. It's zigzagging its way like a staircase. Bishop e6, in we go. And now the other knight can come to this square. And we get some kind of opposite colored bishop ending like this. And the extra pawn is totally irrelevant. Our bishop far outweighs that one. And our pawn on d6 is that fawn and supporter of our pieces. Very nice advantage here. So knight h6, it just shows you how patient you can be in these lines. Now what about rook c8? And this is seen in Hector versus Westerberg, 2011 Swedish Championships. And well, in this position, I think like something like h4 is playable. You can wait with that move, but Hector decided to go knight bd2. And again, it's your choice whether you play h4 first. We're generally going to play knight bd2 when all other useful moves have been played. So I don't know, I might play h4 first, but this is also just demonstrating the plan, which we're probably going to have to do at some point. And after pawn takes, we got that Carlsen-like play. Black now played queen c7, getting ready to get out of the way of rook b1. But in this particular position, black hasn't even developed his knight. In other positions like this, that knight's already found somewhere to go. And it's going to take black a lot of moves to get castled. So Johnny Hector decided it was time to open up the position. And another important move, which don't forget about, is c4. Because we want to open up the position because of our king and our opponent's king. And black has to be very careful. You know, we want to do the exchange here because then our e-pawn might be able to sacrifice itself on e6. And it opens up more lines. And if black takes here, well, our knight can come in, looking at this square again, and our other knight, let's just demonstrate it with a normal move, our other knight, now we're so active, can certainly come straight into g5. This knight g5, I've lost a lot of games when there's a pawn on e5 to this plan. It has to be timed well, but in this case, this is timed extremely well because of queen h5, but also now knight e4 and using that d6 square. So this c4 move, do remember, it's often a possibility and it's often a good move to play, especially when black is moving his queen about, neglecting development. So what else could be played? Well, a6 can be met again with the waiting h4, h5, but if we continue with our normal knight bd2, it just seems like a6 is a waste of time. For example, now, what if black plays bishop c5? Well, that's only a temporary kind of square. We defend the threat on f2, and it's going to run into our knight b3. Knight a5 shows black trying to play on the queen side, and now we see Emanuel Berg, Grandmaster from Sweden, on the white side of this, and he was playing against Meyer. And rook b1 was what he played. But again, because black hasn't developed that knight on g8, so watch out for that knight on g8. The knight on g8 stays there. I really like the c4 move. Even in this position where after takes, we probably want to keep our knight. Our knight now has more potential. So let's go bishop takes. Black can't really take that bishop because our knight gains tempo. And if knight e7, rook b1, and now I would drop the bishop back to d3 with lots of open lines, lots of open diagonals, and lots of play. Our next move is going to be the knight moving into e4. And then we're going to direct it, all our pieces, either towards the king if it goes that way. If the king doesn't go that way, we're going to direct it towards d6. And the bishop can come to f4, rook can come to c1. Lovely, lovely play. So after Johnny Hector's, well, let's just go through this again. Bishop d3, black takes here. What's important move to play? Castles, just don't take that one. And if bishop d7, Johnny Hector's rook e1 is very nice. Now, if the knight comes to e7, in this situation, we should certainly play h4 here. Now, knight bd2 was played by Carlsen, or it transposed the kind of Carlsen idea. But there's much more of a point to h4, and the point is now, what is happening with this knight? If it comes to this square, because our rook's on e1, we can go h5, and it has to come back. And if the knight comes to f5, we can always think about taking it. So this h4 move is a great way just to stop black from developing and keep that discombobulation. Now, a number of moves have been tried in this situation. I mean, in actual fact, h6 is black's main idea and the main move he has played. So we'll concentrate on that one. But let's quickly have a look. Again, we want white to take here because if we can take with a knight, we will. And now this knight move is even stronger because the discombobulation, he's not controlling d6. So a6 is a move, but what do we play against a6? And this is you should know this by now, bishop e3, and this leaves us with that idea of coming into b6 with great play. And look at just black's development. I'd hate to have this thrown at me as a novelty when I was playing the French. I'd be really, really uncomfortable in these situations because I mean, imagine you might be panicking because you're a pawn down. You probably got the wrong course, you are. But imagine the feeling of your opponent. He's thinking, well, I can't develop. I don't really want to put my king on the king side because I can see it's always going to get attacked. I don't like this, and I'm sure black would be much more uncomfortable than you in these situations. Now, knight to f5 should be looked at. We don't need to look at knight g6 because of this one. But if the knight does come to f5, well, I think in this case, there's a strong argument just to take it, right? In this case. The point being, we looked at these kind of positions in one of the previous videos, but black had normally got many more tempos because he'd already got his bishop to e6. Not having the bishop on e6 really allows this move in a number of situations blasting through. And we've also got a useful pawn to h4, which stops any advance over here. So let's say now we can, I think, just take back on d4 with our pawn, because you mean if you want to really experiment, you can go for this one again, but simple is good now. Bishop e6 probably has to be played, and the reason that I like taking on d4 is now we got our normal play of playing on the queen side, and don't forget that h4 and b4, h4 and b4, slightly better position. If you want to, the knight can also come to f4 in these situations, but I would go a3 and b4 and decide then which way to go. Slight advantage. So after h4, rook c8 would be a normal move, and now that we could go h5, but now that we've kind of said to that knight, well, you're not coming out because we're beating the place you want to go of h5, it's time probably go to the Carlsen plan, because we could do this one, but what other useful moves we have? Not so many. Bishop f4, we lose b2. So now I think knight b2 is played. You can always do this knight bd2. I just think it's a little bit more subtle playing these other useful moves first. And after takes here, it's very similar to Carlsen versus Hari Krishna. We may even play bishop a3 next, given a chance. So that's something to consider. For example, queen c7, we could consider it now, but if we stick with our normal plan, we've seen this kind of position before in that Carlsen game where we're going to get lots of fun play. Black's still going to struggle on the king side here. So this again doesn't stop us. And the last move I want to look at is a6, but this doesn't seem to have really any independent value. Let's go knight bd2. And now the reason I want to have a look at a6 is because it was an idea of Anish Giri's, and the point of this move, Anish is waiting for this opportunity to play knight g6. Now, this is the one time where he gets a chance to play it because of the knight blocking this. If he waits one more move, it's not going to work. And if we play h5 now, if we play h5 now, we do allow that knight into the square, which I don't really want to allow. So I think in this situation we should play knight b3. h5 is the threat at some point. And after something like queen c7, we don't want to lose that pawn, so let's guard it. And now again h5 is the threat, so black has to keep playing actively. And after f6, I think we should take on g6. And this is a very double-edged position. Maybe this is one of black's best tries, but it's certainly not without risk for black. Key is g takes f6. Black could try the untried castle's queen side here. Very, very very, very random now. This hasn't been tried, but we're going to obviously have our own attack, something like rook b1 with bishop a6 ideas. This is, I mean, again, this is the kind of position we want. Untried, but bishop a6 is a key idea in such attacking positions. So g takes f6 is probably the more normal move. And now I like rook b1 anyway. And we are going to take there in a lot of positions if black castles. But let's remember our other key moves, h5 and c4. Don't forget c4 when our opponent is stuck in the middle. Let's say he does castle. Well, I'm just going to show bishop a6 in practice. And after this one, if we take there immediately, queen b7, but we have the very nice move now, knight c5. And now taking on a6 is a big threat, so black has to defend this one with queen a5, and now knight b7. And the attack actually rages on. We don't take that rook. We try to sneak in now to b6, and you can see just how dangerous this position is. So I think, yeah, I mean, this position has a lot of interest to us and a lot of exciting lines. So let's go to the main move now, knight e7. This has got to be the most logical. And again, we're going back to h4, and now h6. And this is the main move. What do we play now? This just trying to hold things up over there. Well, here, knight b d2. Again, we've done a lot of things we can do over there. h5 is also okay, but let's just stick with a simple plan. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can experiment here. Even a3, trying to find another useful waiting move to go b4 is something very, very possible to experiment with. So you're just waiting with this knight, but if we stick with something we know, then I think knight bd2 makes the most sense. And now black should take on c3 when this occurs. And here, well, we got our normal idea. Knight a5, we can say, makes the most sense. Trying to get some counterplay here. Other ideas have kind of been looked at when we've seen this before. So let's concentrate on knight a5. And a new idea here, bishop a3. And this is more useful now that the knight's drifted over there. Let's say rook c8. Black's just trying to do something here, because whatever he does on the king side could end up badly for him. If he moves the knight to this square, our point of bishop a3 is we stop black from castling. Let's get the b file. And now, what move would you play here? A good little test of what you've learned so far. What would be a good move for you to wheel out here? c4. c4, when black hasn't castled, is particularly strong, opening up lines in the right manner with better development and full compensation. So rook c8, interesting. And now we could go rook b1 again, but I think rook c1, just preparing the c4 move, and bishop a3 and c4 combine very well, because black's not going to get castled. And let's have a look at a possible line. And we're going to go for the plan we just looked at here, and we'll look at c4 in a little bit more detail now. If it's not taken, we're going to capture, and that gives us this e6 break and a lot of tactical positions. And if it is captured, let's make some exchanges. I would take the rook here, because our rook can even come over here. And again, don't panic in these positions. Even if all the active pieces on the queen side are exchanged off, black is going to be left with the rook and king. So we're actually a piece up for the time being. So after something like knight here, even queen d2, allowing some more exchanges is possible. And let's just see what happens if these guys come off. Well, something like g6 is playable. And now we can go here, rook c1, king g7. And now one last maneuver to bear in mind, knight h2, coming into f6. And this is a nice combination with this one here. So there's quite a lot of food for thought in these lines, and they're not heavily analysed. So I think our suggestion of rook e1 waiting can lead to lots of nice play. And generally after rook e1, we're going to be playing our knight to d2 is the simplest way to play. But we can wait with h4, even h5. If you want to experiment out the realms of this course, you can even play a useful a3 move. But generally, I'd be going h4, knight d2, when at some point black's going to have to take here, because if he doesn't, our knight's going to come and take that pawn. When black takes on c3, we take back with our pawn. It gives us the b file. Our knight's going to try to move into d4. We looked at some of the theory aspects, remember, in that model game earlier, so do check there as well. You know, some of the ideas when we take on g6 slightly different to this one, because in this one we're trying not to allow the knight to actually come to g6, because rook e1, h4, h5 stops that. That's why I think this could even be more accurate, this way of playing. And it's just very hard for black to develop the king side. And at the right moment, when, let's say, we have this exchange after h4, whatever black plays, let's put the rook on c8, shall we? Knight b d2. At some point, black's going to have to take on c3. Do remember this idea of c4. c4 is the key way to keep opening things up in this position. And you can also consider bishop a3. If you just remember all these plans here, it's very easy to play, much easier for you than black, and you're going to get a nice attack. That's what we want in life in this course.